Well, no one likes the word death. Dying is literally the worst thing imaginable. But what can we do? It's the one rule of life we can't break, and we all have to accept it, whether we like it or not. And yet somehow, some people manage to make death even worse. What makes a death truly, famously ridiculous? Is it a freak accident? Is it a twist of dark bad luck? Some grotesque combination of misfortune and questionable decision-making? Maybe all three? History is full of kings, scholars, and otherwise intelligent people who met their end in ways that defy logic. The Darwin Awards celebrate stupidity, but this video isn't just about people removing themselves from the gene pool. It's about the weird, the tragic, and the absolutely unnecessary ways people have left this world. So, let's look at 15 of the dumbest ways people actually died, starting with number 15, accidental self-defenestration. Some people die doing what they love. For Gary Hoy, that meant proving that the windows in his Toronto law office were shatterproof. The truth, they weren't. Hoy, a successful lawyer, had a favorite party trick, running full speed into the windows of his 24th floor office to show how strong they were. For years, it worked perfectly. The glass held, until July 9th, 1993. That day, he decided to impress some visitors with his usual stunt. He charged at the window, just like always he did. But this time, instead of bouncing off, the entire pane popped out of its frame. Hoy, along with his overconfidence, plunged 24 stories to his death. To be fair, the glass didn't technically break. It just came loose. But that didn't make the fall any less final. His colleagues later called his death a fitting end for someone who took his job way too seriously. This lesson from his story is simple: don't do ridiculous things. If you can't, then triple check and avoid height. Number 14, in need of a restroom. Tycho Brahe was an astronomer, scientist, and the unfortunate victim of 16th century table manners. Known for his metal nose, which he wore after losing the real one in a duel, Brahe met his bizarre end after attending a royal banquet in 1601. Midway through dinner, he realized he needed to use the bathroom. But leaving the table before royalty was considered rude, so Brahe held it in. For hours. By the time he was finally free to go, he couldn't. The damage was done. His bladder had burst, leading to days of agonizing pain before he died from the infection. So in the end, etiquette killed him. The fear of offending a king outweighed the basic human need to pee, proving that sometimes holding it in really is the worst decision you can make. Number 13, protesting helmet regulations. Some people will die for their beliefs. Philip A. Contos was one of them. In 2011, he joined a protest in New York against mandatory helmet laws, arguing that riders should have the right to choose. But in a cruel twist of irony, he lost that choice in the worst way possible. Riding his Harley-Davidson, Contos suddenly had to brake hard. The bike fishtailed, sending him flying over the handlebars. His head slammed into the pavement, and just like that, he was gone. No helmet, no second chances. The medical examiner later confirmed the tragic obvious. Had he been wearing a helmet, he would have survived. A protest meant to fight for freedom ended up proving exactly why the law existed in the first place. It wasn't just a dumb way to die, it was an avoidable one, a lesson learned far too late. So first, don't protest against helmet laws. Second, always wear a helmet while riding a motorcycle. If you don't, hope to go to heaven. Number 12, petting a cobra. Some bad ideas are funny. Others, we'll let's say pretty deadly. Wayne Roth learned that the hard way in 1997 when he decided it would be a great idea to pet a cobra. Yes, a real, live, venomous cobra. Already under the influence, Roth visited a friend who just happened to own one of the deadliest snakes on Earth. Feeling brave, or just wildly overestimating his luck, he stuck his hand in the snake's tank. The cobra was not amused. It bit him, hard. His friend, having a bare minimum level of common sense, immediately told him to go to the hospital. Roth? He went to a bar instead. Apparently, beer was a better antidote than actual medical care. By the time his friend finally dragged him to the ER, the venom had already done its job. Roth died on the way, proving that alcohol, poor judgment, and deadly reptiles do not mix well. Number 11. Death by caviar. Royal gluttony has taken many forms throughout history, but King Adolf Frederick of Sweden took it to a deadly extreme. In 1771, the king sat down for what would be his final feast, a meal so insanely excessive that it quite literally killed him. It started off rich: caviar, lavish seafood, and sauerkraut. Then for dessert, 14 servings of semla, a decadent Swedish pastry soaked in warm milk. 14. That's not just overindulgence, it's culinary suicide. After consuming enough food to feed a small army, his body simply gave up. He died shortly after, proving that while royalty may live in excess, even kings have limits. Historians often joke that Adolf Frederick ate himself to death, and honestly, they're not wrong. Of all the ways to go, death by pastry binge is probably one of the most ridiculous, and one of the most avoidable. Number 10. Death by beard. Hans Steininger was proud of his beard, and it killed him. A 16th century Austrian burgher, Steininger was known for having one of the longest beards in history, a staggering 4.5 feet long. Normally, he kept it rolled up and tucked into a leather pouch. But on one unfortunate day, he forgot. And that was all it took. A fire broke out in his house. In the panic, Steininger stepped on his own beard and fell face first into the flames. By the time help arrived, it was too late. The beard that had made him famous had also sealed his fate. It's unclear whether he died from burns or the impact of the fall, but either way, his facial hair proved to be his downfall, literally. If there's a lesson here, it's that fashion can be deadly, and sometimes it's better to keep things trimmed and practical. Number 9. Switching seats while driving. Some rules are just common sense, like not switching seats while driving. But in 2010, Kalita Nicole Hicks decided to take that risk and paid the ultimate price. She and her friend were cruising down a Kentucky highway when Hicks decided to swap places without stopping the car. The convertible's roof was down, and instead of a simple slide-over maneuver, she stood up to climb across. Then, disaster. She accidentally stepped on the steering wheel, causing the car to veer sharply. Her friend, panicking, jerked the wheel the other way, and in the chaos, Hicks was thrown straight out of the car. By the time help arrived, her injuries were fatal. It wasn't just a reckless mistake, it was one of the dumbest possible ways to go. Seat switching should never be done on the move, but for Hicks, that obvious fact came just a little too late. Number 8. Death by exhibit. A Clement Vallandigham had a brilliant legal mind. Let's say he was a genius, but in 1871, his attempt to prove a courtroom point cost him his life. A former U.S. congressman turned criminal defense lawyer, Vallandigham was representing a murder suspect and wanted to show the jury how the victim could have accidentally shot himself. To demonstrate the possibility, he picked up a gun, the actual murder weapon, and attempted to reenact the scene. There was just one small problem. The gun was still loaded. Before anyone could stop him, he pulled the trigger, and the bullet hit him in the bladder. He collapsed in front of the shocked courtroom and died shortly after. Ironically, his client was acquitted, proving Vallandigham's argument correct, just at the cost of his own life. It remains one of the most tragically ridiculous legal deaths in history. Number 7. Deadly alarm clock. In 1886, alarm clocks weren't what they are today, we mean seriously. So Samuel Wardell, a New York lamplighter, invented his own. And why not? The setup? A clock wired to a shelf with a heavy weight on it. When the alarm went off, the shelf dropped, the weight hit the floor, and he woke up. Well, pretty simple, right? Yup, for him too. Except on Christmas night, after showing off his ingenious alarm system to guests, Wardell reassembled it incorrectly. Whether it was the alcohol or just bad luck, the measurements were off, and that mistake cost him his life. The next morning, the weight fell straight onto his head instead of the floor. By the time anyone found him, he was dead. It's a cruel irony that the very invention meant to wake him up ended up making sure he never woke up again. A classic case of DIY gone horribly, fatally wrong. Number 6. Jet skiing over Niagara Falls. In 1995, Robert Overacker wanted to raise awareness for homelessness, a noble cause. His method? Strapping a homemade rocket to a jet ski and launching himself over Niagara Falls. There were two problems. First, the rocket booster didn't really work. Second, he forgot to attach the parachute to himself. Yes, he had a parachute. No, it was not actually secured to his body. When Overacker shot off the edge of the falls, his parachute fluttered uselessly into the wind while he plummeted straight down. The water below did what water does. It wasn't soft, and it wasn't forgiving. Instead of making a statement, he made headlines for one of the dumbest stunt deaths ever recorded. The awareness campaign was lost in the spectacle, and all people remembered was the man who took a jet ski to Niagara and didn't make it out. Number 5. Man gets eaten by alligators. Some deaths make you shake your head. Others make you wonder how someone could ignore every warning sign possible. Tommy Woodward, 28, falls into the second category. In 2015, while swimming near Burkhart's Marina in Texas, Woodward ignored a freshly posted sign warning about a 10-foot alligator in the water. Employees and bystanders begged him to stay out, but instead of listening, he shouted an expletive at the gators and jumped in anyway. What happened next was instant. Within seconds, an alligator dragged him under. Witnesses heard a woman screaming and saw his body briefly surface, then disappear again into the dark water. Hours later, what was left of him was pulled from the bayou. This wasn't a freak accident. This was a man taunting a literal apex predator and paying the price. So, never say, "Duck those alligators." Number 4. Death by knife-wielding bird. If there's a more ironic way to die, I haven't heard it. In 2011, Jose Luis Ochoa attended an illegal cockfight in California and ended up getting stabbed to death by a chicken. Cockfighting, which is illegal in the US, involves strapping small knives or razor-sharp spurs to the bird's legs to make the fights bloodier. Unfortunately for Ochoa, one of the roosters wasn't interested in just fighting other birds. The knife-wielding chicken lashed out, slashing Ochoa's leg deep enough to sever a major artery. He bled out before he could get medical help, officially making him the only known human to be killed by a bird in self-defense. In an extra twist, a similar case occurred the same year in India, where another rooster allegedly slit a man's throat. While that one sounds suspiciously like murder blamed on a bird, Ochoa's fate was confirmed, absurd, and weirdly poetic. Number 3. Devoted to dancing for Jean-Baptiste Lully, music was everything, even to the point of killing him. A famed French composer of the Baroque era, Lully was the personal favorite of King Louis XIV and a master conductor. But his dedication to the arts cost him his life. Back then, conductors didn't wave tiny batons. They used huge wooden staffs, pounding them on the floor to keep time. During one performance in 1687, Lully got a little too enthusiastic and stabbed himself in the foot with his own conducting stick. Not a big deal, right? Wrong. The wound became infected, and doctors told him the only way to save his life was amputation. But Lully refused, because he didn't want to lose his ability to dance. The infection spread, and soon after, he died from gangrene. So in the end, it wasn't music that killed him. It was stubbornness and a serious miscalculation of medical advice. Number 2. Frozen along with a chicken. You'd expect Sir Francis Bacon, one of the greatest minds in history, to meet his end in a scientific breakthrough. And technically, he did. Just not in the way anyone expected. In 1626, Bacon, an English philosopher, writer, and lawyer, was riding through the countryside when inspiration struck. He wanted to test whether freezing could preserve meat. Conveniently, there was snow on the ground, so he stopped his carriage, bought a chicken, and began packing it with ice. Unfortunately, he was so focused on his experiment that he forgot to keep himself warm. By the time he realized he was freezing, it was too late. He made it to his friend's house, but the cold had already set in. Shortly after, he died of pneumonia, ironically proving his theory correct, just not in the way he had planned. So while the chicken remained frozen, Bacon himself did not survive his own genius. Number 1. Improvised bungee jumping. Eric A. Barcia, a 22-year-old fast food worker, wanted a thrill. In 1997, he attempted a bungee jump off a railroad bridge. The problem? He made his own bungee cord. Instead of using an actual bungee rope, Barcia tied a bunch of smaller cords together with tape and secured one end to the bridge, the other to his ankle. Confident in his DIY engineering skills, he jumped. What he failed to do? Measure the length. The next morning, someone walking under the bridge found his body. The cord was still securely tied to the bridge, but it was too long. Instead of bouncing back, he hit the ground at full speed. Well, it turns out that making your own safety equipment isn't always the best idea. It's best to buy them from the market. Barcia proved that the thrill of bungee jumping comes from actually surviving it, something his homemade stuff didn't allow. Well, we really hope you've enjoyed watching this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.